scholars, I am going to review Module 2 out of our textbook, Critical Thinking About Social Problems. And this chapter really goes into sociology, the concepts, theories, and analytical tools that we use in the field, and how they can be applied not only to solving some of our social issues, but also be applied to improving our critical thinking. So this chapter is, for me, I'm kind of nerdy, so it's really fun. But I'm hoping by the time you get through it, you'll really see some of the benefits of sociology and how it helps us understand not only ourselves, but others as well. So the chapter starts out talking about explaining the difference between personal problems and social problems. Personal problems are things that us as individuals might be facing, whether it be homelessness, drug addiction, mental health issues. Everybody in society at some point in their life is going to go through some personal issues. It could even be divorce, losing a child, things like that. Those are personal issues. And in sociology, we acknowledge that those things occur. But what sociologists study is how frequently and what the patterns are when they occur to a larger group, a larger population, a larger sample. Because in sociology, what we're looking at is providing interventions, not just for the individual, but interventions that would be effective and work for a lot of people. So it's important to study homelessness of a person and what they're going through and their experiences, but we as sociologists want to understand that individual person, so we can't just help that one person, but we can use the information to help a lot of people that are going through homelessness. So sociologists, and when they talk about studying social issues, they're talking about social problems, so that people understand that we're not just focusing on individual data, we're focusing on an aggregate of data. So we might be learning about individuals, but it's to help the social group, right? The social world in its entirety. So that's one of the first things that's explained, and that's on page 19 of the textbook. So if you want to take a little bit of a look at that. We also talk about social interventions and what that means and the role of sociologists in trying to help solve social problems as far as providing the information for society so they're able to make better decisions, come up with solutions, and then we study those solutions because sometimes solutions create even more problems rather than fixing the problems. And then it goes into what we call the sociological imagination, and that's on page 21 of the text. Now, the sociological imagination is extremely important and valuable when we're trying to develop our critical thinking skills. We talked about that there's 4 characteristics of critical thinking, that if we work on those 4 characteristics, they'll help improve our thinking. And then we talked about what we already have, the tools that come within us that help us think, like our rationality, experience, emotionality. In sociology, we actually have some methods and practices that help us critically think. They help us remove bias and value-laden ideas, so then we can be able to analyze not only ourselves but society from a more objective viewpoint. And so the sociological imagination is that concept. Learning how to see yourself in the world like if you were looking from a balcony. That's always the analogy I like to use. If you think about it, a lot of us live our lives just like you would see a movie or go to the theater or see a musical group. When we're looking at the world, we're always the performer. We're the one on stage and looking at everybody else around us and how they're interacting with us, and then we respond back, right? Well, what the sociological imagination is saying is step outside of yourself. Get off the stage, get out of where you're used to looking at things, and stand in the balcony or stand in the audience and look at the stage and look at the people around you. So that's kind of an analogy to explain how the sociological imagination works. A lot of students will go, oh, it's just thinking out of the box. But as soon as you say thinking out of the box, you're saying something everybody says, so that you're not really thinking out of the box. But I understand that they're trying to make a connection. And that's really what the sociological imagination is. It's trying to get you to think about things outside of your history. Your history is the time that you have lived your life. So the time period we all live affects us. So I grew up in a time period where we didn't have computers. I know, right? We didn't have computers when I was younger and I went to college. We still had typewriters. So I had to learn computers once I was an adult. So how I problem solve is quite different. So when I come up with something I want to research or learn about, I don't first think about, oh, I can Google it. It's like, duh, yeah, you can do that. But for some reason, because of my history, I didn't grow up with computers being the answer first. I grew up with books being the answer or people being the answer. So when I want to learn something or figure something out, I'll either go look for a book on it or I'll think of who I can call that might know, just depending on what it is. If it's something more academic, I'm always looking for the book. But if something more informal, like gardening or something, not that I garden, but something like that, then I'll be like, who does that? What friend do I know or relative that does that I could ask? Whereas students, my younger students, because I can't say all students are young, but my younger students, who have grown up around computers, their solution is always just go on the computer, go online, Google the answer, and you'll find information about it. So that's part of history and how it influences our thinking. And so the social imagination says, hey, you have to take that into consideration, that the time that you've lived has influenced your thinking. And it may not have influenced it in a productive way or an objective way. The other thing is our personal experience. And when I did the lecture in Module 1, I kind of explained that I grew up around domestic violence. And so that personal experience really does affect my thinking and behavior. You all have personal experiences called your biography that are also going to influence your thinking and behavior. And so the social imagination, again, is the concept of learning how to remove yourself from those positions of bias so you can see and interact in the world more objectively based on factual, accurate information. So that's all covered on page 21. When you get to page 22, this is where we get to the tools, and we'll be using these as throughout the semester, just like the 4 characteristics of critical thinking. The 6 theoretical paradigms we'll be using the entire semester. And I have other videos posted on the theory, so in this one I'm not going to go in-depthly into them. But what I want you to understand is that if you learn how to use these actually help you identify your assumptions and remove bias in thinking. It broadens your perspective. Even though you may not realize that that's what it's doing, that's how it works. Because each paradigm is asking you to analyze something specific in society. So it's taking the focus off yourself and how you would normally look at things and asking you to look at it using this lens. So there's 6 of them: functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, feminism, exchange theory, and environmental theory. And each one, it's looking at the same social issue or the same group of people or the same context, but it's asking you to put on a different lens to analyze it, to make you notice things that maybe you didn't notice. So that's how the paradigms work. Like I said, make sure you watch the video where I explain each one of those paradigms and give some examples that will really help you out. There are some guiding questions that I always like to refer students to on page 25 here, and it is figure 8. As you're doing some of the assignments where I ask you to analyze the problem using the theories, these are guiding questions you can ask yourself. So if you're not quite sure, you haven't learned the definition of functionalism quite yet, you'll know it by the end of the semester because we go over it a lot. But at the beginning, you might have to use the question to help you answer the problem that I ask you to in the application that we're doing. So if you want to use something using functionalism, you would use this question. You would ask yourself, what is the function or purpose of the system, institution, organization, or process that's represented in the film I ask you to analyze or represented in the social problem I ask you to analyze? So if you ask yourself that question, it helps you figure out what you should be looking at. And each one of the theories has a question to help you do that the first few times until you learn the definitions, and then you really won't need this anymore. You'll get it. I promise you'll get it. After some practice, you will. If you don't get it and you're having some struggles, just email me and we'll schedule an appointment so we can meet one-on-one, and I'll help figure out how your learning style works and then maybe come up with some keys that might help you learn these a little bit better. Okay? Then we move into the demography section, and that starts on page 24. And it basically introduces how sociologists use data and why data is important. And then we go into the social research process, how we gather data, that sociology is just like any other science. We still use the scientific method. We use the same 5-step process that everybody else uses, whether it be in biology, chemistry, etc. And so it goes through each of that, and the importance of having objective data rather than subjective, right? We don't want bias evaluated information, right? The new term, we don't want to be using fake news. We want to make sure that we're using objective empirical data that's been proven, right? Peer reviewed, those kinds of things. And so there is a 5-step process. That process is outlined on page 26 through 28. If you're not familiar with it, then please make sure you review it. None of the concepts are difficult to understand. So if you have any questions, though, specifically on those, just let me know. And then there's the rest of this module really looks at like the type of data that you would use from different social settings and situations that would help you look at things more objectively. And it particularly goes over the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data is that uses numeric data, so more like statistics. Qualitative data is more like narratives and stories. So, and when we're studying people, both types of data are valuable and they provide good information, but the best information is when you use both methods, because you can have statistics and data about an issue, and I'll take something arbitrary that's not important. Let's just say we wanted to find out in the United States what people's favorite ice cream is, just for fun, right? So we do this survey, we use numeric data, and we might have different things in there about ice cream, how frequently you go, where do you go, what's your favorite flavor, which one do you buy the most, because we want to compare to see if they say what their flavor is, what they're actually buying. And so we might collect all this data and we get this report, and we might find out, that most people are buying their ice cream at the grocery store. They're not really going to a shop. We might find out that they say their favorite flavor is cookie dough, but what they actually are buying is vanilla. So all of that is great. We're like, okay, great. We know people like, cookie dough and they're buying vanilla, but we don't know why. It's like, why did you say you like cookie dough? Why are most people like cookie dough, but why are they buying vanilla, right? So qualitative data, now we talk to people and we try to understand why, a deeper understanding of what's going on. Now we can figure out why. And there is research on ice cream and the most frequently bought ice cream, and it turns out to be the favorite. I kind of fudged on the favorite, but the favorite is vanilla, and it is the one that's most consumed, and that's because people can do things to it. And so they add things, different things. You buy it for your family, and family members have different things that they like, so they can put different things that they like on it. So, but we've learned that through both using quantitative, numeric, and qualitative data, right? And so that's the importance. And when we're looking at important issues, whether it be gender equality or racial discrimination, or we might be looking at obesity, having the numeric data and the qualitative data, the narrative data to understand what's really going on, what the facts are behind the situation are really important, because they help us come up with more accurate solutions and ways to deal with the issue. So the last part of the module really goes into that. And examining, why is it important to collect your own data? How is that different from using someone else's data? Using someone else's data at this point in our careers is very valuable, because more than likely it's been peer reviewed. If you go out and collect data and you're a student, you haven't refined the method on how to collect it from an objective viewpoint to make sure it's not biased. It hasn't been peer reviewed. Things like that. So it does there's a table on table 2 on page 29 that goes over that, the values between both types of data. And that really covers pretty much most of the module. If you have any questions about module 2, something that's unclear to you, or a term or concept that stood out to you that maybe I didn't cover in this video, and you have some questions, just email me or schedule an appointment, and I'll be happy to go over it with you one-on-one. Okay, thank you. Ta-ta for now.